Hi there, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us. This is the biggest room with the biggest number of people I've been in for quite a while, so I literally feel like I'm headlining Glastonbury. So if you're watching from home, thank you for joining us. Today we're here to discuss how can we creatively build a more sustainable future, and we're joined by a brilliant panel of experts who have so much to say on the topic. We've already spent literally ages talking about it. But the reason why we're here is because this year the UK will host the 26th UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, otherwise known as COP26, in Glasgow, assuming everything goes according to plan for the rest of this year. So in the run-up to this, the UN have announced a whole series of global sustainable development goals. But, what does this mean for the rest of us? The consumers, the brands, the organizations, the individuals. And how can we use our voices and consumer power to really make a difference at the very, very top, to make sure that the rest of the world stays true to this vision and to involve and engage our consumers, our colleagues, our loved ones, everyone we love, and all our followers in this kind of sustainable future. Because let's face it, the last year has not been kind to this earth. So in this discussion, we're going to talk to a number of leading figures from organizations from all different sectors of the creative industry who have committed to using their work to build towards a more sustainable future. So I'm very pleased to introduce our panel. We have Sophie Matthews, a sustainability and diversity champion, a director and strategic comms expert with 20 years of experience at Allbirds, the British Fashion Council, Diesel, where we met a very long time ago, Puma, and other collaborations across fashion, music, art, and retail. We also have George Lamb, who you might recognize from the telly and radio, and is making me feel very nervous today because he's a much more established professional at this. But he is also the founder of Grow, a social enterprise that works in schools and communities to promote mental and physical well-being and a connection to nature in response to a climate emergency. And finally, we've got Alex McIntosh, a business strategist, art director, and educator who founded the Centre for Sustainable Fashion at London College of Communications and leads the Fashion Futures MA course and most recently the Project Selfridges Earth Initiative. So first of all, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. Thank you to Fora for hosting, Margaret for putting this all together, and Magic Breakfast for joining us in this very, very small audience. But I think we're going to have a fun time. So first of all, I wanted to ask you guys, we hear this word sustainability a lot, but what does it mean to you as the term, and what does it mean to you in your own personal and professional life? Sophie, do you want to start?
Yeah, of course. I think to me it's about a sort of deeper awareness, and I think once you feel like you're a more sustainable person or you live your way more sustainably, you can't actually look back. So it's seeing a plastic bottle and thinking I'm never going to buy that again. I've moved to kind of vegetarianism. My kids are very conscious around kind of sustainability. And I think it's, a deeper awareness of your daily life and then adjusting your life as much as you possibly can to adapt to being more sustainable and seeing the world in a different way so that it's about the planet and looking after things, whether it's clothing, food, transport. It's a mindset really shift for me.
So like a whole top-down thing?
I think so, yes. And it's a mindset of feeling and a way of being that then you can't come back from that.
What about you, George?
Yeah, I'd agree. Very much it's about mindset, and I started this education program, Grow, a couple of years ago, and people often look at it, as naturally as you would, from a kind of figurative perspective, like what are we actually physically teaching kids, and I keep kind of pushing back, saying no, it's more philosophical than that, and unfortunately everything is taught in fractions, and actually everything happens in relation, and so. We're kind of learning in loads of different silos, and whilst there's seemingly lots of very knowledgeable, smart people out there who care, the world, kind of year on year is in a worse situation than it was the previous year. And if we're going to kind of turn the ship around, we need to start joining up the dots, and we need to start kind of walking the walk, I guess.
Right, because at the start of the pandemic, and we were talking about this earlier, everyone was like, oh, well, it's terrible, but at least nobody's going to fly anymore. And very quickly, that's kind of proven that people are absolutely dying to get on a plane and create some carbon emissions for the memories.
Yeah, yeah. It's... You know, I think naturally, you know, as with everything, we will bounce. You know, we're all going to kind of bounce back into a lot of the same old patterns, and you know. But ultimately, I hope, and maybe I'm just a kind of, you know, like a kind of blind optimist. I hope that this is a point for a bit of a reset and a reboot. And I think, and I'm kind of, you know, I keep telling myself anyway, we're at a kind of intersection now where we can decide if we want to just fall back into all the same patterns that haven't really served us or the planet, and or we can start to rethink and recalibrate and do things slightly differently. And I've got everything crossed that that's going to be the way we move forward.
Alex, I feel like you're an optimist as well, right? So what does sustainability mean to you?
Well, I guess I run an agency that works with a lot of quite big companies that I suppose are driving our kind of materialistic behaviour, so maybe are part of the problem. But I'm also really lucky that I've been quite involved in education over the years, so I've worked with some brilliant people and some brilliant minds, and someone much more brilliant than me once said to me, what we need is true materialism. We need to stop being materialistic in a sort of surface way and become materialistic in a real way, which means kind of engaging with the depth of things, you know, be it what you eat, be it what you wear, be it where you travel. What does it all mean? What does it connect to? So yeah, that's sustainability for me. You know, materialism is usually used as a very negative word, but actually if you're truly material, then you're engaged in the world.
Right, because you can't really be materialistic without any kind of raw materials from the earth, which are rapidly running out.
Exactly.
So what do you think that creative communities can do to get kind of climate change and sustainability on the agenda? Because I think it's become, you know, like a real buzzword, but I'm curious to know, you know, how do you encourage kind of deeper engagement with that? Sophie, how do you do that in your work?
I think, you know, the creatives are the people that make, you know, the feelers think, the thinkers feel. They're these individuals that create this beautiful story. So it's about the storytelling. And the creators also the creators that are making things. So whether it's the fashion industry or, you know, food or design, those people are the ones that kind of are creating this beautiful space for us to live in, and these items, and therefore the starting point is them. So it's also not only what they're making, but also the stories that they're telling and how they're then showing up amongst communities or amongst consumers and telling consumers like how to be, how to think, what to buy. And so I think, yeah, the creators are the starting point of it. And I think what's beautiful, the beautiful shift is that in all these industries, whether it's food or fashion, there's a real movement towards a sustainable future. And these pioneering people are coming up and coming through. And so I think it's a really powerful, and as we say, from a positive perspective, there's real movement for change in a positive light within that kind of design and creative community.
George, has that kind of been reflected in your experience as well in setting up Grow?
Forgive me, what's the first part of the question?
Basically, you know, how can creative people encourage sustainability and put it on the agenda?
Yeah. I don't think they've got any choice other than to do so, really, moving forward. You know, like it is, you know, kind of irrefutable, but the biggest challenge we face as a species is sorting the climate out. And if, you know, for me, the catalyst for my kind of big life change was reading this book called How Soon Is Now, which is about the ecological mega crisis. I hadn't grown a plant or was particularly interested in the natural world up until that point, and for whatever reason on that sofa on that day, all of this information that I just kind of, you know, batted away and swiped away so regularly just landed with me, and I realised that if we didn't radically change our behaviour towards the natural world, then we're all finished. And like that's the reality of the situation. So it's on everybody in whatever discipline they have, whatever they're doing, to do their bit and to make that the kind of principal message. Otherwise, we won't be around. The planet will be fine. You know, it will just have a little reboot and get rid of us. Yeah.
Yeah. Alex, what about you? How can people kind of creatives put it on the agenda?
Well, I guess you hear a lot of people talking about trusting the science, right, which we need to do, 100%. But the bottom line is we don't. we don't trust the science. So what George has just described is that a creative, because essentially that book is a piece of creative content with a lot of information in it, that creative person made the culture in which he was able to kind of go, this I feel this means something to me. So that's what creatives do. They create the culture and the feeling, and in that feeling, that science can kind of become something people trust or believe in, or So that's what we're there to do. If we're calling ourselves creatives, we're there to make the space in which the science can be believed and engaged with, and so it's really important those two things run hand in hand.
Yeah, and I think this last year has shown that it is absolutely essential to trust the science and what the scientists are telling us. Yeah. I should also say that if you have a question and you're watching us on the virtual stream, you can pop it into a chat box, and I'm reliably informed that this iPad will deliver these questions to me. We'll see about that at the end of this Q&A. So if you've got anything you want to ask our panelists, just drop it in the chat. And I'm sure we can take questions from the people in the audience as well. So one of the things I think that is really informative is, talking about the brands and the people who actually are able to do this really well, because you can hold them up as kind of models, as good examples for people to follow. So I'm curious to know, starting with you, Sophie, who are the companies that are doing this well, who are really leading the way on this?
Yeah, I don't think you can have this conversation without mentioning someone like an Oatly. And the way they operated was they took kind of oat milk and decided to kind of revolutionise the food industry, but led by creatives. And so somehow they made oat milk sexy. But not only in doing that, they also put the carbon number on every single packet. So it was sort of like the science mixed with the creativity. So I think even if you don't believe in what they're doing right now, I think actually that was a turning point in terms of the kind of food industry. And then I think any brand or business that sort of collaborate. So recently Priya Ahluwalia has collaborated with Gani, which is just putting those sort of young creatives with a bigger brand on the kind of creative agenda, and merging those two kind of communities. So what she does versus what Gani does, and making sort of a global statement, and more awareness of kind of creativity in fashion. And then, what Alex has done in the work with Selfridges in terms of retail. So I think there's lots of businesses that are making interesting changes. And then my last role was at Allbirds, which is a sort of sustainable sneaker brand out of San Francisco. And again, they put the carbon number on every pair of shoes. So those ones would be the ones that spring to mind for me, certainly.
I remember a few years ago at a music festival and seeing an Oatly stand, and people were literally queuing up to get Oatly branded merch. And I thought to myself, you would have never seen this 10 years ago. Imagine Reading Festival, teenagers queuing up to get Oatly t-shirts. It just wouldn't have happened.
Exactly.
What about you, George? Are there any kind of, prime examples that stick out for you in your mind?
I think there's going to be a lot more moving forward. I think the blockchain is going to change things a lot from a provenance perspective. And all of a sudden, everybody's going to be kind of, encouraged to wash their dirty laundry in front of everybody else. And so we're going to be able to hold people to account in a way that we've never been able to before. And I think ultimately, out of that, the people who are genuinely doing it and doing it at every level of their business, not just the kind of 3 stages before it becomes client-facing, I think that's really going to shift the dial. So I think over the course of the next few years, I think the brands that actually are genuine in their pursuit of trying to be sustainable, I think they're going to be the champions, and they're going to win out, and everybody else is going to fall by the wayside.
What's the blockchain for people who aren't aware?
So the blockchain is blockchain's the future, basically, and it's the ledger that all the cryptocurrencies that we hear about sits on. So it's this kind of what's the right word when you can't you can't mess around with it, and so it is, and it's open source, and it lives. And so at the moment, for example, if you were a clothing supplier, you might be a kind of triple gold standard or whatever, and I'm never going to go all the way down through the kind of 15 layers of your supply chain to find out that the little factory down at the beginning is polluting all the rivers in its local constituency or whatever. Whereas on the blockchain, everybody in that loop has to be on there, and I can't just get bamboozled by the kind of accreditation at the top. And as we've seen recently with the whole, I know it had its faults, but the Seaspiracy thing, a lot of these trust marks are actually paid for by the corporations who need the trust mark, and so it's a kind of virtuous cycle. But anyway, it will bypass all of that. and all of a sudden, not that everybody will want to do it, but you will be able to go on and have a look online and see this thing, and just and the traceability then will be irrefutable, and so we'll, you know, I don't know, just all of a sudden, like, we've got the information that we've needed for so long.
Yeah, so it's kind of like everyone has to show their workings and, you know, scribbles as to how they managed to get a £4 dress on the high street, and people are going to find out you actually get it through really bad means.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And Alex, what about you? You know, like, are there any kind of companies or brands or creative really doing this kind of thing well?
I mean, there's loads, to be fair. You know, Sophie mentioned quite a few of them. I always kind of going to rep for the small, I guess. I'm wearing a shirt and a jacket from a brand called Story today, who I love, and I probably could have my whole wardrobe from them quite happily, because for me, they are just kind of unashamedly what they are. They're the whole sort of conversation around fashion where people are like, oh, I don't want it to look like a sack, or I don't want it to be hemp, or I don't want... They're just like, no, we are environmentalists and we're into it, and we are going to show that in the way we design, and they've made it cool and people love it, and they have a really strong following. And I think that's the thing, is it's kind of like, be authentically who you are. I mean, the word authenticity is a bit overused, but I still think there is this kind of need to sort of, if you have a genuine purpose and a genuine sense of what you believe in, and that is communicated through the way you create, it's incredibly powerful. I mean, I think what George is doing with We Are Grow is a really good example, and not a sort of obviously a creative business, but it's the sort of sense and purpose of it is so clear that you can just, you feel it. I'm a bit of a kind of obsessive about, does it make people feel something? And if it does, you know.
I think that sense of having a real purpose and sense of engagement is really important, right? Because I feel like it is possible to do this badly, and, you know, we know that there are companies and brands who have kind of like gone the halfway house and kind of like done it a bit half-assed and not really come out of it looking really well. So I was wondering, you know, can you guys think of, you know, any brands or companies that could have done better, you know, that kind of made a stab at it, but maybe missed the mark for whatever reason, and, you know, why that happened, you know, like as a kind of, to contrast with the good role models, potentially, you know, the accidents and mistakes along the road. Sophie?
Yeah, and I think in this space people make mistakes all the time because nobody's perfect. Like, we're all sitting here and we're, you know, sustainability champions. I'm not perfect, and no business or brand is, even if they're a B Corp or they're held up as like the highest statement of kind of doing good. And so therefore I think it's how they then recover from that. Potentially, it's how you come out of the back of a disaster because you were greenwashing or whatever you were doing, and come out stronger and saying, well, we've learnt from it and this is what we're going to do, and take the consumer on the journey with you. And I think the other thing is to actually genuinely want to change and make a change, versus kind of just doing it as a marketing ploy. I think they're the ones that get me the most, is when it's just pure advertising to hook consumers in. But I think the beauty of things like blockchain and the technology that's starting to exist, as a company called Provenance, and that's exactly what they do. So when you buy an item, you can exactly see the chain of events and how that item, whether it's food or fashion, got to you, and understand the kind of ecological and environmental standpoint. Therefore, it's going to get to a point through technology where these brands have nowhere to hide, and therefore that's the benefit, I think. And then those ones that are built, you know, to not be successful in sustainability, how do they creatively get themselves out of it and create a better business?
Can you think of a company that's kind of gone on that journey, you know, from kind of, you know, maybe making a few mistakes and now are committed to that kind of change, and how they kind of overcame that skepticism and criticism at the start?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's so many that make a big statement and then come back from it. Like, I don't know, like your example earlier was like Brewdog. So, you know, that they're planting loads and loads of trees. So they're doing so much good, but I think it turned out that where they were planting trees, they were taking up other things. So it's then the recovery from that. So the point of it was that they were trying to do good, and I think they will continue to do good because they're, you know, one of those powerful companies. However, if it's resulting in like destroying communities, then it's not a positive. But I think, yeah, business should be built to kind of be a force for good, and I think there are more businesses that are coming up that are in that space.
Yeah.
So, yeah, turn it into a positive.
George, can you think of any kind of similar companies who've been on that kind of journey of maybe half-assing it and are now kind of committed to change, or committed to at least improving?
In all
companies
honesty,
who are just half-assing
I've
it
been
now?
I've been in a field in a school for the last 2 years. So I'm a bit out of the brand world, but I, certainly what's happening now as we're getting a bit more profile with Grow, I'm getting more and more companies coming to me, and then of course the immediate thing is you're like, wow, wicked money, great, we could really do some of that, but then actually you have to go and do your due diligence on them as they will do on you. And we just got approached by a massive brand, probably one of the biggest brands in the world, and it's horse shit basically. They don't mean it, and they're not real about it, and it's just a facade that they're throwing up, And it was funny because I got kind of sucked in at the beginning. I was like, yeah, great, that means we can actually build this thing and do this and that and the other. It's a lot of money, and then gradually, and it was weird because I've been out of the kind of brand world and been out of this kind of world for a bit, and so I I wasn't quite match fit, and I just got seduced in, and I know they're shitbags, and sorry, excuse my language, I know they're not right, and then. But then I was so, just like, Gollum, just like, precious. and then a month later, like a month into it, they're just making me jump through hoops, and I'm just like, oh my God, like these people, it's unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, there's, just be, all that glitters isn't gold, and just be wary of that, and not to say, I'm very definitely a glass half full person. So like, I want to believe in people, and I want to believe people are doing things for the right reasons, but do your homework and make. Yeah, I was driving along. I don't know them. I don't know anything about them really. But yesterday I was at a traffic lights, and the front of H&M had a whole thing about these this new algae foam, sole on the thing, and how that was the future and all the rest of it. And it was just, and I was just looking through this shop, and there was just literally hundreds of thousands of items that nobody needs with this special algae foam, and I was just like, what are we living in? This is mental.
What was the brand? No, sure, I don't know what to say. Yeah, I think that is really interesting, right? Because it's like companies who think that in order to make a sustainability statement, they have to do it through selling more stuff.
Yeah.
And I think you see that quite a lot now, where it's like, we need to launch something, anything, a product, hopefully maybe something we can sell to consumers to prove that we've got our sustainability credentials, which to me kind of feels like the wrong way around of doing it, right? Alex, what about you? Can you think of companies who have, maybe not approaching this the right way, or are doing something, or have messed up at the beginning and are now on a journey to kind of make it better?
Yeah, you show me the company that hasn't, right? I mean, there's some really obvious ones. I would, again, like sticking with George's philosophy of glass half full, I actually think if you've ever done any teaching or anything like that, the best way to learn is by failing. Right, so actually, if you look back to the 90s and you see when Naomi Klein wrote No Logo and she exposed Levi's and Nike, it did actually start a conversation about the way we were operating our supply chains and the reality of what it was like for workers in those supply chains, and that did sort of instigate some change. And then, a few years ago, everyone probably remember Burberry and the burning of stock, hundreds of millions of pounds worth, but they, I think, handled it in exactly the right way, in that they stepped up and they sort of took the heat for it. And it's a practice that everyone else was engaging in as well, but they stood up and sort of went, okay, look, we're doing this, and we are going to try and address this and figure out the way forward. And, it's hard, that's tough for their brand, but the reality is that it needed to happen. So I kind of think, these are the ways that we move on, by actually opening up and kind of going, this is, I fucked up, to be honest, and put your hands up and try and do something about it. And until we get that kind of culture into business, we're not going to get very far. That we kind of need to be opening up about what's not working as much as we are about what is.
Burberry's a really interesting example, right? Because it's the first time I remember like a real social media blow up over something that was, obviously ecologically terrible, but it really felt as if they took the heat on social media. Yeah. And that's one thing I'm interested in knowing as well, when brands and, people take themselves on this sustainability journey, they also open themselves up to criticism, right? Because we want to be rigorous about it. But let's say if you're a brand and, you're taking heat on social media and people are criticizing you, maybe in the press, maybe in public, I mean, how can you make sure that you're not just shutting down and getting defensive? Like if you're receiving kind of flack on social media like Burberry did, how can you learn from it rather than kind of shutting down? Sophie, what do you think?
I think transparency is a difficult word because especially fashion businesses, they don't want to be entirely transparent for various reasons. But I think it is about taking that consumer on the journey with you and holding your hands up and saying we're not perfect, but this is the journey we're going on and this is the steps we're taking, and take them with you. You know, I think businesses are afraid of becoming sustainable, being sustainable, or even saying this is the tiny bit we're doing over here, because for fear of greenwashing. Whereas I think the reverse is true, and that's what consumers want to understand. They want to understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, that you're not perfect, but you're prepared to make a change, and these are the steps that you're going on, and take them with you. So I'd say, yeah, it's more about kind of being open and honest that you're not there yet, but this is where you're trying to get to.
Mm. George, what do you think? Because I feel like, you know, you've been on a farm for 2 years. You're looking at it from the external perspective, and maybe you're a little bit more skeptical of this kind of journey that big brands can go on from your experience. You know, how can brands deal with that kind of consumer feedback, being like, people being like, I don't believe you, I don't trust you, I'm skeptical, what's this about?
I mean, I think, firstly, I think it's brilliant that there's a conversation going on. I think it's brilliant that we're living in an age now where there is, you know, there's got to be some upside to social media, and that means there's a level of accountability now that, you know, and all the, you know, everybody can see, you know, brands' behaviour and have a platform to interact with them. And so, you know, I think there's you know, wonderful things about that. Totally lost my train of thought, sorry. I can't even remember what you asked me.
I guess if you being the consumer, like, you know, you and me, we're probably more on the consumer side of things. But looking at a brand saying, we're trying to be more sustainable and eco, we're releasing this line of products that, you know, is B Corp certified or whatever, and we're thinking to ourselves, yeah, whatever, what a load of, you know, horseshit.
Yeah.
How would you want that company to respond to those concerns?
Well, I think life's about accountability, you know, and about taking responsibility for your behaviour. And there was I can't remember the name of the guy. I read it. It was what was it? What was that book called? It's called like Mark something or other about something and what the F blah 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 blah.
Mark Moreau.
Yeah. Do you know the book I'm talking about? It was orange. Kind of. I read it. It was, you know, like book. You know, it's the same. Just regurgitating the same thing for 12 chapters. But anyway, the crux of it was about taking responsibility, and he showed all these amazing examples of people in their lives who'd taken responsibility, and through taking responsibility, had had massive shifts in their behaviour and ultimately the outcomes for their life. You know, so, you know, this is the age we're living in. This is the moment where we all put our hands up and say, you know, like I was a game show host, I was contributing absolutely nothing to humanity. I was actually doing probably the opposite. So I was, you know, complicit in selling brain damage or, you know, or like certainly distraction to poor people, because that's who watches game shows, you know. And at a certain point, you just have to say, right, that doesn't resonate with me anymore, and I don't want to live like this, and I don't want to behave like that. And you know, everybody, you know, like, most of the people who are working in this brands, you know, have like they're human beings. They've got families. They've got kids. They know what's going on. They don't, you know, they don't want to wreck the planet, but you know, they want a job and they want a house and they want all the dreams that everything's been sold to them over the years. And so, you know, they're just playing the game, you know. But like, you know, this is the bit now where we all get to go, okay, cool. Like, I don't want to just carry on the same stuff that's been going on before and has led to this kind of like awful kind of, you know, patriarchal nightmare that's, you know, destructive nightmare basically, and so like we're going to change things. And
yeah, and I think that's a journey that consumers and brands have to go on together, right? Because you can't really do one without the other. Brands are going to go out of business if consumers all they want is just fast fashion and cheap food all the time. Alex, I mean, how can brands kind of take people on that journey and, you know, be available to take criticism and take it gracefully and learn from it rather than just getting defensive?
I mean, I always have this sort of feeling there's this weird thing we do where we're like, oh, brands, corporations, and us. And it's like a business is just a group of people. And yeah, some of them might be very rich, and that gives them a slightly different position in the world and a slightly different level of power. But it is just a group of people coming together, hopefully with some sort of shared aim or some sort of sense of like, and that shared aim might be let's sell the shit out of things and get a lot of stuff to people, but it's still a shared aim. So they're human beings, and I don't know, like, to me it's just George's point about accountability, kind of building on that a little bit. It's like, how do you set up a situation where actually being criticised is a positive thing? I did an interview last year and somebody called me a Bolshevik, and I was like, I was reading, I mean, the comments, I was like, fucking hell, these are like, the criticism was just full on, and I kind of came away from it and I was feeling really like, oh. And then I just sort of started thinking, hang on, let's go back over this and let's actually think what points have these people made that are valid? And there were a lot, even when they were couched in really unpleasant terms. And if, as a business, you can kind of go, all right, what are we going to actually learn and how do we feed some of that back? So there's a kind of flow going on between us and the people who are shopping with us, then, or whatever it is, shopping or buying our service or whatever it happens to be. Then you start to stop having this kind of them and us feeling. We're all kind of we're all customers, we're all people with jobs, so we all have a responsibility in our working and our personal life to bring those values that we have day to day together with how we work. I sort of think it's that simple, really. So each person, step over the door to work, don't leave your values at the door, take them into the office, sit down and make them part of what you do every day.
I think that's really interesting because it brings me really nicely onto my next question, which is about kind of working together in collaboration, right? Because I think we often think about it as we're working together in a business with the people, with the colleagues, but we don't really think about it as collaborating with the people we are talking to, the consumers and the clients and the customers. So, I mean, how important is nurturing that relationship, I guess, Sophie? You know, like, is it kind of reformatting how we approach clients and customers? So it's not just about selling to them and telling them that they need to buy it and encouraging them to change their behavior. It's about kind of building a more sustainable relationship.
And you mean in the sort of collaboration space?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think collaboration is key to this. Like, we're not going to get there if we all just sit and say, well, someone else is going to do it. So I think collaboration across business, across kind of governments, across kind of infrastructure is absolutely vital. And then the other word that springs to mind is co-opetition, which is where kind of brands that are usually, you know, against each other collaborate. So Allbirds just came out with the shoe with Adidas. And it's not about the shoe necessarily that it's the lowest carbon shoe they could create. It's more the principle that two collaborating businesses and competition would work together for a sustainable future and to create a lower carbon impact on the planet. So that's the first one. Like, why can't businesses across the globe collaborate together instead of compete for the greater good? And I think it's about, therefore, that you can start to share innovation, you can start to share materials, and obviously the price of kind of things like sustainable materials goes down the more that people use them. Therefore, and then their business model, and probably they're going to make more profit because their innovation is there. So I think it's about openness and it's about innovation and it's absolutely about collaboration.
Yeah, I feel like George, you probably collaborate with a very different set of people, right? So you work in schools, you've probably met people in government as well, talking about your project. I mean, how easy is it to collaborate with those kind of more institutional organizations? You know, the ones like school heads and, you know, the education system, you know, that have been going and doing their work in a certain way for literally decades.
I think there's a lot more collaboration goes on in the commercial sector, unfortunately, and actually, you know, over in, I mean, like, kind of broadly speaking, like the left, alternative stuff, or like, you know, people trying to do things a bit differently. We have an issue that there's or people perceive there to be an ever diminishing philanthropic pot. And so they're really reluctant to kind of share their kind of resources and their contacts, and, you know, not because ideologically we're not aligned, but, you know, what happens if I introduce you to these other people and then they start funding you and they're not funding me, and the problem is over here the kind of commercial sector is, you know, going at 3,000 miles an hour, and all the people over who are trying to do things a bit differently are all, you know, petrified of sharing information with one another, even though they're into the same stuff, and as a result, you know, it's moving at a snail's pace, and we're up against this great big Goliath, and so actually, when I first started, somebody said to me, "Oh, you should go and speak to these guys called Football Beyond Borders, and they're amazing, and they're really doing, you know, they're doing wonderful things." So I went to meet the boss of Football Beyond Borders, and I thought I was going to have another kind of third sector, kind of like, oh, you know, like, really love what you're doing, slightly cagey chat, and he was just like, right, well, we've just spent £8,000 on our safeguarding policy, which is, you know, ostensibly focused on working with kids in secondary schools, and that's exactly what you're going to be doing. So why don't you take this, and that will save you £8,000, you know? And I was just like, wow, like how refreshing is that, you know? And then just think about, like, there's another, you know, 50 organisations just like us. Well, 8 lots of 50s, you know, £400,000. Guess what you could do with that? You know, a hell of a lot of good stuff. But we don't, because we're all just there being separate. I'm back to the blockchain. You know, like, if we could all be sharing stuff, things could be moving a lot quicker.
Yeah. Alex, I saw you nodding a lot during that.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous when you say something like that. It's like, well, obviously, why would you not? Why would you not? I mean, I'll peddle out a proverb, but there's an African proverb which is that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that is basically what it comes down to. If we don't start sharing, you can be a leader, you can be the first one past the post, you can take all the credit and get all the marketing from it, which is what a lot of businesses are still focused on, of course. But the reality is, if you want to make change, you are going to have to collaborate. If you want to kind of really embed that, you're going to have to collaborate. So we're not going anywhere until we create a more collaborative culture.
So, I mean, the topic for this discussion today is how to creatively build a sustainable future. So that sounds like one of the biggest obstacles to kind of speaking to people creatively, right? So, you know, this entire idea that you have to be number one, you have to be the most eco, you have to be the most green, you have to be first past the post. But what kind of other obstacles are stopping people from kind of learning about sustainability and, you know, improving it in their daily life creatively? Sophie, do you think that, you know, that's one of the big issues, or are there kind of other ones that are kind of stopping people?
I think it's just a minefield to people. There's so much, and even the term sustainability almost needs a rebrand, you know, because every business is jumping on the bandwagon of the word. Therefore, consumers are kind of a little bit in the dark, and I'd say even the media's in the dark. You know, there's no guideline to sustainability. Therefore, it's become a buzzword, and customers and consumers don't necessarily understand what they can do, and they're a bit overwhelmed by the thought of it. Well, does that mean I can't fly on a plane? You know, how do I operate in my daily life to become more sustainable? To the point that I think some of them are just like, I can't do it, it's too much. It's sort of mind, and it's also, I guess, the concept of the planet and ecology and the fact that, you know, this means that the planet may not exist is too much for your brain to go to. So I think that's the barrier. I think the barrier is probably the word sustainability in itself. The barrier is also governments and making sort of pledges and actually not making a difference. So I think it's the vastness of it all which is sort of stopping individuals from saying, you know, I want to lead a more sustainable life. And actually probably they are in their own way, you know, if they're walking to work or cycling, if they recycle their food waste, you know, there are so many little things that probably people are doing in their daily life that mean they are living a more sustainable life, but they're just maybe too consumed, great wrong word, but consumed by the idea of how much and what it means to sort of understand it.
Yeah, I feel like the attitude is, well, I don't want to live a completely green life because I would quite like to go on holiday and fly, so maybe that just means I should just give up on all of it.
Yeah.
Which is a big issue, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think, George? You know, what are the big obstacles to stopping people from kind of, I guess, embracing sustainability?
Massive, isn't it, really? I think that I think it all feels overwhelming, and I think there's a level of abstraction. You know, like I think when you tell people that there's, you know, huge forest fires and the deforestation of the Amazon and the seas getting polluted and all the rest of it, like of course, like no anybody in their right mind's not going to say, oh, that's terrible. But like, I've never been to the, you know, I've never seen the great big plastic iceberg in the sea. You know, like I can't see microplastics. I don't, you know, like I haven't been in a forest fire or whatever, you know, so it's just not going to resonate. And I suppose that's, you know, the reason we ended up, you know, I've ended up doing what I'm doing, and started, you know, ostensibly with food, is because it doesn't matter how much of an urbanite you are, and the majority of people now living in, you know, big cities and conurbations, everybody has a touch point with the natural world, you know, 2 or 3 times a day when they eat food, you know, and if we can, you know, small achievable goals on a daily basis make you feel good like that. It's not, you know, it's not complicated. So just, you know, don't set yourself up for a fall, and you know, and Rome wasn't built in a day, and loads of other cliches, you know. But like it's, you know, like you just got to do. Everybody's got to do their bit, and like my mate always talks about is quantum activism, you know. Like I'm, you know, like not everybody's going to become a kind of zealot, you know. Like just doesn't work like that. But just, you know, try and kind of get your head out your arse and be a bit more conscientious and like all this. Like, you know, I can't affect change, and all. I think that's all nonsense, you know. Like as you were saying earlier, like brands, like everyone's like, oh, but it's our brand. It's a bunch of people in a room. Like that's what it is. Like call people out, you know. Like you know, like you can't hide behind that brand bullshit anymore. You know, like, oh, but like your corporation, whatever, change the corporation. It's just an articles association. Get everybody, like, if you're real about something, like, you know, and like, I think calling bullshit on people is the best way to change stuff, basically, you know.
Yeah, and I also really like what you said about, you know, people might not, you know, ever grow a plant maybe, but they're going to eat 3 times a day, hopefully. So, you know, there's that kind of personal touch point there. And I think that's really interesting, you know, this idea of, you know, creatively trying to reach people through those kind of personal touch points. Alex, you know, how important is it that we kind of use our creativity to try and reach people where they are actually at, you know, as opposed to kind of, you know, shouting to them about like microplastics, which they might not ever see in their life?
Yeah, it's funny. It's weird because some of the stuff you guys are saying about things being too big, in some ways I think the problem is things being so big makes the small stuff feel irrelevant. So people are like, oh my God, this is horrendous. They watch Seaspiracy or whatever. So, oh my God, you know, I hear it all the time. I've got to do something. And then you're like, well, okay, start recycling your plastic. And they're like, that's boring. I don't care about that. I want to do something big. I want to make a difference. And it's like, that just isn't, you have to kind of like bring the ordinary into a space where it's exciting. So there's some great social media platforms. There's a platform called Adapt, and they're graphic designers, and they do stuff where they just kind of make these really big issues feel very engaging and interesting and also manageable, but they make that manageable part feel cool as well and exciting to do. So, you know, we kind of got to bridge the gaps. We can't be like talking about, you know, we're all going to be burning to death in 50 years' time, and what you need to do about that is walk to work. Of course, that is what you need to do, but you've got to figure out how you give people a sense of more agency. And I don't know the answer to how we do that, but we've got to put our creative minds to that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think those those milestones and those pivotal moments can come from really unusual things, right? They don't necessarily come from someone like knocking on your door and asking you to donate to the WWF or something. They can come from all kinds of tiny moments in your life. So I'm really curious to know, you know, what was the pivotal moment for you guys that took you on this journey to incorporating sustainability into your kind of professional and personal lives? Sophie, was there a kind of light bulb moment?
Yeah, I think for me it's having kids. And I guess my legacy, or like being on the right side of history, so that you did something rather than sitting back and doing nothing. And it's interesting when you have like a 6-year-old who's like, why are all toys made of plastic, when he's very conscious about, and you're kind of like, yeah, you're 6.
Absolutely no idea.
You know, you're 6. Yeah, you're right. Like, and so I guess it's like trying to kind of be a part of the change, be a part of a positive movement for good versus adding to the problem. So yeah, children and bringing children into the world was definitely the catalyst for me.
Yeah, I actually don't know why toys are made out of plastic now. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
Plastic's super durable, and it will last forever and ever and ever. There the problem lies, and also the solution in a way.
Yeah, but your kid's only going to be 6 for another year kind of thing,
Exactly.
so it doesn't make any sense either.
So we stop making so many toys and start recycling them and putting them back in the loop, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, that's the creative thought there. What about you, George? I feel like you mentioned a book that...
Yeah, the book. So that book, How Soon Is Now, was this kind of seminal kind of book in my life that really changed everything. Before that, though, I think I met a guy called Andy Cato, who's now one of my best pals and a business partner, and I'm also a kind of acolyte as well of his. He was in a band called Groove Armada. And I was at a party somewhere, and we kind of half knew each other. I used to work in dance music a long time ago, and we kind of got introduced, and we started to have this conversation. This is in 2013, I think. And I thought I was going to have a fairly kind of run-of-the-mill dance music chat and like, have you know, like, oh, well, you've been out to a beef much and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, what have you been up to? And he was just like, oh, well, I just sold my publishing rights and I bought a 100-hectare farm down in Gascony in the southwest of France. And I'm going to try and sort out wheat production because that's the predominant crop in the world and 30% of the carbon emissions of the planet are coming out of agriculture. So if we can sort out wheat, then that'll have a big impact on that. And I was just like, what? Sorry, what did you just say? And so yeah, that was a big kind of, you know, and I was just like, wow. And you know, when you hear people talk truth, like you can't. There's no getting around it. So yeah, I jumped on the bandwagon basically.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I can't believe you went in expecting a really like banal chat about like going to Ibiza and you came out like fully converted.
Yeah.
That's great. What about you, Alex? What was your like kind of light bulb moment?
Groove Armada on the radio this morning. I was like, love it. Anyway, yeah, well, I suppose it's quite a long time ago for me now. Like, but I think it kind of came from two things really. One was meeting somebody who was not in a big way kind of like out there environmental activist at all, but just somebody who really lived it, and being like, God, wow, this is quite amazing. Meeting somebody who, you know, lived rurally, had a completely different kind of life to me, and we just connected. And she was just a brilliant person. I really respected everything she had to say, and that got me on a bit of a journey. But then also, I don't know, like it wasn't one thing for me. It was kind of a combination of getting into probably gardening randomly in my 20s, where I was like, oh, I really want to start growing stuff. And growing stuff is the best way. Get your hands in the soil and you suddenly realise what the soil is and how incredible it is and how much comes from it. And I got into beekeeping and just, you know, just stuff that probably most people wouldn't really want to do, but that took me down a road that made me think, okay, my work has to reflect how I feel about this personally. And that's kind of back to my point about, like, I can't have what I do feel disconnected from what I do in my personal life. I need those two things to belong together. So yeah, but that's been a long journey from being like 25 to being 45. You know? Yeah.
Gardening is kind of a gateway drug, isn't it? I can personally attest to this.
Growing vegetables is a gateway drug.
Yeah,
man.
That's the plan.
It's literally, it is. I swear to God, there's not. I watched my 4. I went out to harvest lettuce from the garden the other day with my 4-year-old. And I'm watching him, and he's like, it's amazing, and he won't eat lettuce if I paid him every penny on. Not that he cares about money yet, but you know, and then he ate it because he picked it. It's a different thing, and you know, we've got to get people back into spending more time just in nature. We are nature. We're part of it. We have it.
Yeah.
I could go on, but anyway.
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting things about watching the rise of social media is realizing that there are people now seeing animals go viral that are probably going to go extinct in the next like 5 years, and that all we're going to have left is a bunch of funny viral videos. Yeah. That to me was like kind of the moment where I was like, God, this planet really needs to get its act together. Yeah, otherwise.
Exactly. Well, what every child's going to know that an animal is a chicken or a cow or a pig, you know, like, and not going. I mean, that's not diversity. We've got to see more than that.
Definitely. So we've got a whole bunch of questions. B has asked, so it can be difficult to place an exact value on, you know, sustainability in, for instance, schools that don't. Sorry, I'm just going to read all of B's question first. What can we learn from the creative industries to help companies define the value of sustainability and help push this business case forward for sustainability along with the ethical case? So I guess it's kind of about, you know, companies usually want to make money. How can you convince people that sustainability is kind of profitable along with being the right thing to do? Sophie?
I think I was at one of the Ellen MacArthur Foundations, which is, you know, it's a platform for circularity. And you had huge businesses there in like car manufacturing and all kind of different industries, and their point of view on it, and this was 3 years ago, was that actually when they moved to kind of a greener model, their business became more profitable. So yes, it took them 3 years, and there was infrastructure they had to put in place, and mindset shifted from kind of like C-suite level so that the whole business was behind it. But actually to build a sustainable business is building a business for the future. And I'd say that across sort of every type of kind of industry, that yes, if you are, the word sustainability is sustainable, it's longevity. Therefore, I think consumers will come with you if you're building a business that's fit for the future. And to have sustainability intrinsically linked in your business, it is a no-brainer. And I think people and consumers, especially kind of the younger generation coming through, will switch off to brands that don't have a sustainable mindset, because they understand that this planet's for them, and these brands might have messed up things, and therefore they need to get on board and start changing in order to kind of make a place that people can still live and exist. And so, yeah, I think a sustainable business is a business built for the future.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I remember reading a news story that said that loads of companies were just running out of resources during the pandemic because of shipping issues and also just generally just natural extraction. And I was kind of like, well, if they moved to more sustainable materials, maybe they wouldn't be flailing about, probably spending way more money trying to procure stuff that probably isn't even out there anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point.
George, how do you kind of make this business case?
I mean, this is another kind of cliche or whatever I'm trotting out, but like you can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. Like that's like not my opinion. That is it. That's the truth. And so, smart businesses want to stay in business. That's the whole point of them. And I can't remember what it was, but like Woody Harrelson did this video where he was talking about like smart businesses who are selling red things. If society says it wants blue things, they'll just start making blue things, and they'll stay in business, and that's their main focus. So I think us as consumers, and it seems to be the way it's going now, just have to start demanding what it is we want, and the smart organisations will fall in line with that, and not the other way around.
Yeah, so start demanding kind of green things,
yeah,
not the red things. Alex, what do you think?
Well, George has just made a point that I think we're going to all have to start to grapple with. We cannot just grow and grow and grow. And the conversation that says the only thing that has to be infinite is money, like I won't accept that I can't keep making more and more money, that conversation is not, I think, the conversation for the future. So we're going to have to sort of say, all right, what does being sufficient look like? What is a business that is big enough and is able to kind of function efficiently and efficiently from an environmental perspective and from a financial perspective without having to keep on expanding and doing more and more and more. I think that's a really exciting conversation. I'm really excited by conversations about degrowth. And when I talk to businesses, sometimes I'm almost want to be just talking about, well, how can you get smaller, not bigger? Why are we all so obsessed with size? I mean, we could have a long conversation about that, but it is like we fetishize scale and
yeah,
being big.
Yeah. Sorry, are you really so everything? So I'm really happy that the education system doesn't just absolutely move at breakneck pace. Like you can't just go in and go I've got a great idea. Like here's some here's some stardust and woo and and then it's everywhere basically. It doesn't work like that, right? So you have to go in and you have to spend time and it has to be rigorous and you have to and it has to be really robust and all the rest of it. And then everybody, so I'm there trying to figure out this system, and everybody I speak to in the outside world is just but how are you going to scale? But how are you going to scale? And that's all they talk about. But how are you going to scale? I'm you don't even know what I'm scaling. You want me to scale. All you're talking to me about is scale. Come and look at what it is.
Yeah.
We'll scale it when it's ready, man. But we've got to figure out what it is. And so I think this whole kind of obsession with just relentless growth actually is obscuring the possibility of actually delivering real, proper, necessary stuff,
That's really interesting because it leads really well into Fleur's question, which is we know the planet can't sustain capitalism in its current form. So the big problem is overproduction and the need for growth. So what alternatives do the panelists think can present a viable way forward, or, a full-on revolution or tweaking the system? What do you think?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it comes back to competition, and everyone's got to collaborate, like cross-industry, so that these resources or the technology or the innovation is there to be used by multiples. And you're a great example of like something that costs £4,000 and then you share it across. So I think as people start to share things, whether it's kind of ways of working, whether it's materials, whether it's innovation, surely then we're all going to get better, faster, and more sustainably, which is going to benefit the greater good. So I think it is about collaboration.
George? What do you think? It's a big question.
Yeah, I think
we can solve this one.
Yeah. How long you got? No. I think it's about priorities, and I think it's about really recognising what's important to you as a person and what's important to you, like from a community perspective. And it's about getting that in balance. Like there's obviously, like France has got lots of problems, but like I like the fact that they don't want to work more than like 32 hours kind of thing. Like I think that's wicked, and they want to have a nice lunch, and they want to and I know, like I've worked with French companies and all of that. I know it's not all like just glorious over there, but like when I was a kid, all like because I'd been brainwashed by the system, I was just like, I want to be a millionaire. Like that's like, and everybody does, and like for some reason that's our kind of that's our kind of focus, basically, as we're growing up. And like money doesn't. I know this all, it all sounds a bit trite, but like genuinely, like that's not like we didn't get put on this planet to become millionaires. That's not what we're here for. Like there's way more interesting stuff going on than just the pursuit of wealth. And if that is our principal driver, and if that's the only metric of success in society, like there's this amazing geezer called Rowley who lives next to my mum down in like very, very rural Herefordshire, right? And the geezer's barely been out of Herefordshire, can't read or write. Geezer, and like so society thinks Rowley's an idiot, yeah? Rowley has forgotten more, in the last 6 months than you'll ever know in your life, right? This guy knows every single bird song. He knows every single colour in the grass, in the hedge, in the thing, and how the trees. He tell you what the weather's going to be like in 3 days. There's infinite wisdom out there, and there's all sorts of there's this, the possibilities of like who we can be and what we're capable of. Like I don't know if you see that Free Solo. Have you seen that film? The geezer who climbed up. Like look at that guy. Like what he's achieving. Like what's possible as a human being. And like everyone's like, I've got to get to the office and get a promotion and get some money so we can get my kids into uni so they can get a better job or whatever. It's like like get your shit together and just start figuring out why you're here. Like you'll be gone soon.
Yes.
Sorry, I know that's probably not like
No, I like it. It's a very expansive answer. Yeah. It's a very expansive question, to be fair. Alex, what about you? Do you think it's growth is unsustainable?
All of that, I'm totally in agreement. George's point is basically like what we value, right? So that Rowley has a whole set of skills that we don't place financial value on, but they are incredibly valuable. So, like, the problem with capitalism, and I am not anti-capitalist, despite what somebody said, I'm not
being a Bolshevik.
Yeah. I'm not. I just recognise that we have this one dominant way of viewing this one lens we put over the world, and there are so many others. And it's like if you look at the way an ecosystem works, there are all sorts of things growing, living, dying, and that system has an interplay, and we just have this one thing that we say this thing must grow and grow and grow, money. No ecosystem works like that. It doesn't work. It's not functional. So like unless we can sort of recognise that and start to diversify, and it isn't about one alternative, because that's the problem. Everyone's like, oh well, you can't come up with a good alternative. It's like, well, no, because there isn't one thing. There isn't capitalism or communism. There's a diverse ecosystem in which different kinds of economies and different kinds of systems can work. We're just not willing to let that in at the moment, and I think we're going to have to find some ways. Otherwise, I don't know.
Otherwise, we'll all end up being Bolsheviks.
Yeah. Well, we'll end up being Bolsheviks, or we'll end up dead, right?
So I think we've got time for one more question, which is for George. Someone's asked, how important are young people to change in the next generation you're working with, and also how do we get involved with Grow?
I mean, short of the building being on fire, trying to get adults to go in the same direction at the same time is nigh on impossible. And when I started doing community work, I found that out very quickly, and I was like, right, this is a complete waste of time, and like you're really trying to help and trying to like move, push the envelope or whatever it's called. But I just like, if you can turn a kid into a jihadi, you can turn a kid into a light warrior, Like you just need to put the right information into kids before they've bought into patterns of consumption and belief systems and got set in their ways. And so like the kids are going to change everything. And I know it's quite a lot of pressure, but like it's basically on them, and it's on us as the kind of elders or whatever to make sure the right information's in front of them and to support them and kind of hold the space for them and encourage them, because they're the ones who've got that, I'm like my kind of energy pot is starting to wane as I go into my 40s, but like when you're in your 20s, like you're like, I'm going to move that mountain over there, like no problem, and if they're going at it with the right tools, which is what we're trying to teach them through Grow, then my fingers crossed, they just go out into the world and make the right decisions, like I would have often said this to people, but like genuinely, and I come from like good upbringing and my mum's really solid and all the rest of it, but like, if you'd have given me an Audi TT and 100 grand, I would have sold arms when I left school. I really would, because that's all I was on, and I just wanted to get mine and get money and get this and that and the other. And like kids today, if you said go and get a job selling arms, you couldn't, they'd laugh you out of town basically. So fortunately, the world's changing, consciousness is, we're evolving, and there's loads more amazing information, and there's Grow and a whole bunch of other organisations out there. What I'd say to that person who got in touch, like, please come on our, I don't know which camera I'm looking at, but please come on our website and follow us on social media and come and support us. But like chances are there's a Grow in a town near you. And usually the best way to be impactful is to find something that's like on your doorstep, like there's people within a mile of where you live who need help and support, and there's other people who are like-minded with you who want to be part of the change. So like join up, be a team, share resources, actually start impacting things on a local level, feel like you're moving, you're moving the dial, because otherwise it's all in abstraction again and you'll start feeling isolated and it's not working, and gradually that this kind of principle of quantum activism, gradually the consciousness will shift and life will be better and everything will be all right.
I think that's a really good point to end on, and everything will be all right. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you. Our panelists. Thank you, George, Alex, Sophie, for really enlightening and provocative talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Kid.